This is a meeting of the New York City Water Board. It is a business meeting, so the point of the meeting is for the board to consider board business, discuss items among themselves, but in a public format, and to receive informational updates from the Water Board staff, Department of Environmental Protection, and from outside presenters who we may invite from time to time. It is not a forum for public input, so I would ask everyone, put your phone in listen-only mode. If you have questions or anything you want to share with us, this meeting is not the right format for that. You can send any questions, comments, or anything you want outside of this meeting to the board staff, and I'll give you the information right up front. The email is nycwaterboard, one word, at dep.nyc.gov, or you can call us at 718-595-3591 anytime. We'll take your questions and concerns there. We'll report it back to the board staff, but this is a business meeting, not for public input. You need to call or email us with your questions, and we'll get them to the board. All the meeting materials we'll be discussing today have been posted electronically on the Waterboard website. That website is nyc.gov/nycwaterboard, all one word, which is nycwaterboard. We'll be talking about quite a bit of financial information today. All the financial documents and supporting materials are in the PDF packet. If you go to that website and look at the announcements section on the right-hand column, it's all there. We have an outside presenter today from the Parks Department who will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation with us. Because we're in a conference call format, we can't do that by visual share like we normally would. That presentation is in the PDF packet you'll see on the Waterboard homepage as well, if you want to follow along there. The last thing, for anyone who is hard of hearing and wants to follow along in real time with text captioning, we have a text captioning service that transcribes the call, makes it available in real time. It's a streamtext.net URL. It's quite lengthy, but if you open that PDF packet on the homepage and look at the agenda bottom, it's right there. You can copy and paste that link. We'll also be posting a transcript of this meeting and an audio recording of the meeting to the board's website in the coming 2 to 3 days. So with all that said, I'm going to hand the meeting now to Secretary Rodriguez, who will do the roll call and we'll get things going. Thank you.
Okay, it's L. Rodriguez calling the roll of the board. Chairman Carney?
Present.
Thank you. Member Fernandez Ketchum?
Okay.
Thank you. Member Freed?
Present.
Thank you. Member Golden?
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Sue?
Here.
Okay. You're here. Great. Thank you. Member Shaw?
Here, present.
Thank you. Member Zarili?
I'm here and happy to join my first Waterboard meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. First of all, welcome to everybody on what is a lovely, what is this, Thursday afternoon in New York City. We haven't been together in a long time, although our last meeting was on the 14th of June. We're going to get to that in a minute. We were not together then. It'll be great when we can figure out how to do that again safely and comfortably. I want to start out by introducing to all the members our newest member, Daniel Zarili. Dan is a special advisor on climate policy at Columbia, and he advises the university on climate, of course, and on sustainability, and is involved with something I only learned about recently, the new Columbia Climate School. Dan was a senior climate policy advisor to the city under Mayors de Blasio and Bloomberg, and was with the New York City Economic Development Corporation for many years. Dan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Al.
We have a lot of important guests with us today. I guess all of our guests are important, but I'm going to mention several of them. We are joined by representatives of the New York City Parks Department, and they'll be presenting a proposed real estate transfer. I'll introduce them shortly, but I've had the pleasure of meeting Mitchell Loring recently. Very much enjoyed your company, Mitchell. Thank you for joining us on the phone. Colleen Alderson and Nicholas Molinari are also on the phone with us today. We're joined by representatives from, of course, DEP, including two of the senior professionals who are involved directly with the department's new billing software project, which is very exciting. I've met some of those folk recently, and it was a pleasure to see the beginning of the implementation of that project. And I think you'll enjoy that report. Jeff Lynch is with us, Deputy Commissioner, and Albert Kramer, who is Project Manager. From the Waterboard staff, we have Joe Murin and Omar Nazem, and we have Albert Rodriguez, whom you've heard from, who is Secretary of the Board and a legal advisor. We have a number of important agenda items, including a review of of the proposed real estate transfer. It is a section of Hart Island. It's in the Bronx, and it's going to another city agency, of course, as well as a vote on approving the audited financial statements for fiscal 2021. This meeting was preceded by a meeting of the Joint Audit Committee of the Water Finance Authority and the Waterboard, and I want to thank Adam Freed and John Golden for joining me at that meeting. It was a very productive meeting, great outcome. We'll talk about that in a minute. And of course, the Water Finance Authority had its three representatives present at that meeting. We're also going to hear presentations from DEP and the board staff, providing us with a financial update as well as an update on other activity at DEP. We'll be voice voting today. I'm going to ask Mr. Rodriguez to call the roll after a motion is after a resolution is moved and seconded, so that we can have a voice vote, since we can't see each other. Aye and raising your hands won't help. The first agenda item then, the approval of the minutes of the June 14th meeting. As I say, we weren't together then. We're not together now. I hope we can get together sometime in the near future. You've had a chance, the members have had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any comments, proposed revisions?
Yeah, hi, this is Member Freed. I had two comments that I'd love to see if we can get included. On page 2, when we talked about Members Freed and Golden having some discussion around the request for the rental payment for the city, in particular, I think Jonathan and I raised the fact that the discretionary waiver of the rental payment caused a lot of uncertainty and financial risk for the Waterboard and for the water system, and urged the city to permanently eliminate the rental payment. And I'd love to see particularly that on record, that members of the board were urging the city to permanently eliminate their rental payment moving forward, so that we could remove that uncertainty and fiduciary risk and financial risk that we face. And then on page 8, at the end, and I appreciate the Secretary for noting my comments around the stormwater management and the urgency needed to incentivize stormwater management through rate setting. I also had urged DEP to accelerate the sustainable stormwater rate study that's happening to enable us on the Waterboard and DEP and others to explore a more progressive rate structure as soon as possible, and finding ways to speed that up, knowing that the billing system is also being updated, which was something that was preventing us from moving forward. So if that could also just be put on record, not only noting the urgency, but having the direct ask from the DEP, do anything possible to accelerate that study and a resolution of that, so that we on the Waterboard can act sooner.
Adam, I remember both comments. Al, what do you recommend?
Yes,
shall we defer the approval of the minutes pending those two additions in whatever form you would choose to do that, or shall we approve the minutes subject to the board's approval of the addition of Adam's two comments? I think both should be incorporated. I simply don't know how best to do that.
I think you can take the latter of those actions, which is to approve the minutes subject to the two amendments being made to the minutes. which will be, which if approved by the board, would be made and then redistributed to the board.
Well, then we'll make that the motion. Thank you very much, Al. Does everybody understand what we're doing? Are the members clear on how we're going to do this?
Yes.
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 Okay. Then may I ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the June 14th meeting, subject to the revisions that the board members will be given an opportunity to read and approve before they're incorporated in the minutes. May I have that motion? Thank you, Ann. That was, yes, John, that was you?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Arlene Shaw, second.
Arlene, thank you very much for the second. Mr. Secretary, will you do the roll call?
Yes. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To approve, subject to, of course.
Okay. Member Fernandez Ketchum, how do you vote?
Approve pending the changes, if any.
Thank you. Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approved pending the changes, and now just to reassure you that we do read the minutes, so thank you.
That's very apparent for some time now. Member Golden, how do you vote?
Approved.
Member Sue, how do you vote?
Approved.
Thank you. Member Shaw, how do you vote?
Approved.
Member Zarrilli, how do you vote?
And just a procedural question here, since I wasn't at the meeting, I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to vote for the minutes, but I have no objection to the minutes.
Okay, very good. I think that's a reasonable response. Your response is more than reasonable. But, Mr. Chairman, the resolution has been approved by 6 members, and I think Mr. Zarrilli...
And there are no objections from the 7th. I understand. And the minutes from this meeting will reflect that.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rodriguez, thank you very much. Let's see, our next agenda item is the Parks Department presentation on a proposal to transfer a section of Hart Island from DEP to the Parks Department. The presentation will be made by Mitchell Loring, Colleen Anderson, and Nicholas Molinari.
Hi there, this is Mitchell Loring. I am a senior project planner from the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation in the Planning and Development Division. Regretfully, Colleen Alderson and Nicholas Molinari are not able to join the call, so it'll just be me.
So you've got the duty, I guess. Thank you.
So I've got the duty, and I'll try to cover everybody's questions, but there may be a few things that I'll have to take back, and if that's the case, we'll work through those. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for hearing this request. I understand that the presentation and memo that was prepared was already distributed to the board, and since we are doing this over the phone, I will try and be brief in my description of everything, so no one can see the images. So I'll just start with the overview of Hart Island, is that it is the city's municipal cemetery facility and has been used as a cemetery since shortly after the Civil War. The island had several other uses throughout its history. It had various institutional facilities, hospital facilities, reformatories, substance abuse rehabilitation centers, different military uses, as well as jail uses by the Department of Corrections. And the Department of Corrections had been operating the island for most of its history up until July 1st, 2021, earlier this year, where the Parks Department received jurisdiction of the majority of the island, which is Block 5649, Lot 1. However, we paused on the transfer of Block 5649, Lot 100, once we realized that that portion of the island was not under DOC control, but was actually under DEP's jurisdiction, which has led us here today. So from that point, Parks did a little bit more research, background information with DEP to figure out why that portion of the island was under DEP's jurisdiction. I went to the North River wastewater treatment facility with some DEP staff to look through old records. We discovered that there used to be a wastewater treatment plant on the Lot 100 area, the very southernmost portion of this island. It was demolished in the 1970s, and the transfer from DEP to Department of Corrections at that time never took place. So Department of Corrections continued operating their cemetery facilities across the island since the time of that facility's demolition in 1970, even though the portion of the island was still under DEP jurisdiction. A set of local laws was passed in 2019 that outlined this transfer of jurisdiction from the Department of Corrections to New York City Parks. And so that's the main impetus behind all the actions related to the transfer of Hart Island from DOC to Parks, and the reason why we're here today. So Parks can get, hopefully, request this approval of transfer of this remaining Lot 100 from the Waterboard and finalize the various actions that were requested of the city via the local laws from 2008. Sorry, I was listening to my presentation, see if there's any other key points to highlight. I think it is worthwhile to note that since the wastewater treatment facility was demolished, burials did take place on Lot 100. There are some grave tombstones located at that portion of the island, and again, DOC had operated that portion of the island as they did the rest of the island throughout their history up until this point now, where Parks took over jurisdiction on July 1st, 2021, and Parks and the Human Resources Administration began through operational control of the island very recently on October 1st, 2021. I think that hits the key points. I'll pause and see if there are any questions, and happy to go through more details.
Mitchell, before you take questions, can you all hear me? I get this mute thing wrong every once in a while.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Before you take questions, Mitchell, I'd like to add a few things to your report, your presentation. First of all, thank you very much for hosting me and several other people on the luxurious ferry ride from City Island to Hart Island on Tuesday.
Yes.
The two are, it's a 10-minute ferry ride for anybody who's interested. I had a I was curious about this transfer, and I wanted to see it. And Omar was kind enough through Mitchell to organize that trip, and it was an eye-opening. It was almost an adventure. I got to see the southern end of the island, which is on three sides surrounded by water, but probably has absolutely no commercial value whatsoever. It's the smaller end of the island. It is. There are now grave sites there. I suppose it's conceivable that some inspired developer could do something with it, but it would not be worth. I don't think it would be worth any effort. I'm not qualified to make such judgments. It was an eyeball decision I made. Hart Island had on it a number of structures, and I was unaware of that. There was a facility there for wayward boys. There was what is referred to now as an asylum of some sort on the property, on the island. There is now what was a beautiful church, and these are all on the southern end of the island, not all inclusive of the area that the water that DEP holds, but near and or on that site, lot 100, I guess it's called. It is an interesting island because all those buildings, and there must be 10 or 11 of them on the southern end, have been allowed to deteriorate and will be raised at some point, probably by the Parks Department. What impressed me most was that Hart Island actually has a historical significance that I had not known of before. With the tale is that there are 1 million people buried out there. Our guide on the island was Captain Martin Thompson, and Captain Thompson made it clear that that's got to be wrong, but there may be thousands and thousands and thousands of folk buried out there. A Civil War memorial, which is impressive. A number of Nike missile sites. Makes sense. During the Cold War, the Army decided that that was a good idea, and so they're of course defunct, but the area where these sites are still clear. It sounds to me like the Parks Department has an opportunity, don't know that it will, but has an opportunity to actually explore the historical significance of Hart Island to the public. And how they choose to do that and where the money comes from is an entirely different story. But just for the members' sake, I will probably vote in favor of this transfer. It makes sense. And now, if there are questions for Mitchell, please ask them.
Hi, this is Member Frida.
Say again, I'm sorry, there are two of you trying to talk at the same time.
Adam, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I don't have a question necessarily on the project. I did note that in the resolution, it connected the transfer of this land with the Greenpoint Landing real estate development project. And I was assuming that was a erroneous typo left over from the last land transfer we did last board meeting, and just wanted to clarify that.
I made the same assumption, Adam.
In the final document pack that was circulated yesterday, you don't see that. The resolution you'll vote on today does not have that included.
Perfect. Thank you. I was dealing off of the first packet.
Thanks so much.
The version in your email that we'll vote on and the version on the website for the public are the correct text of the resolution, do not include that section.
Perfect. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is whether there is currently, in connection with any of the structures or otherwise, water or sewer service on the island, and if so, how that's provided.
Sure, I'll try to answer that question to the best of my ability. My understanding is that all of the wastewater treatment plant that was demolished in the 70s at that time was decommissioned because newer facilities were built throughout the eastern Bronx, and that service from the island was cut off. However, I am under the impression from DOC's past involvement on the island that there is some form of water service on the island. There are several hydrants spread throughout the island. Some of them are functional, some of them are not. So I'm sorry that I don't know the exact technical details of how water is supplied to the island, but there seems to be some kind of connection.
And this is Joe Murin, if I may interject now on that point, Jonathan, member Golden. Whatever water supply or if there is any sewer service that is on the island would be connected in some way to the Hunts Point wastewater treatment plant, which is in the South Bronx. And as with other city-owned facilities, parks-owned facilities, the Parks Department would be responsible, for all future maintenance and taking care of those facilities, the sewer lines and the water lines on the island itself. And we as DEP, just like any other parks facility, we would be responsible for upkeeping any of those connections. And that would just be part of our normal services that we, do with any of our other city agencies where they have a facility that we're servicing.
Thank you. And I just also wanted to thank the the Waterboard staff for its work on this, and specifically, determining whether there was any meaningful value to the water system, and the conclusion was essentially that there is not, for a variety of reasons, including that there are apparently human remains in the area that we're considering, and there are benefits to the system, including not having to maintain the upkeep and being relieved of liability. So I think all of that counsels in favor of permitting the transfer.
John, it's Al. Thank you. Are there other questions or comments for Mitchell Loring?
Yes, this is Evelyn Fernandez-Ketchum, and I just want to comment or share. So thank you, Chair Carney, for your remarks in introducing this matter. Omar, thank you so much for the update to the board. I'm not ignoring your responses on the matter at all, but I just want to share, some of my reactions as I was reading through the material. So, as I was reviewing, the questions for me revolved around process of the information and just utility and value of the lot. Again, Omar, you emailed answers to some of the questions, but I think it's important for me to share for the record. You did mention that AECOM consulting engineers reviewed and confirmed no impact to DEP's revenue operation. Still, I wonder if you could have been presented these findings before voting. The firm also confirmed that there's no utility of lots for future projects, but I still wonder, to what extent are we thinking about the future? In the memo from the Parks Department, dated 9/13/2021, there's mention of public and the public's interest being considered. I did wonder who is the public that we're referring to. Was there a survey, a town hall meeting, a forum where the public's interest was recorded? Omar, you did mention and explain this transfer is consistent with the requirements of the board's lease agreement. Again, I still wonder if as an agency we have considered the value of this lot as an asset. At this moment, I still have sort of these questions in the best interest of DEP. I don't know if it's in the best interest of DEP to let go of the lot, or I think for me to make an informed decision, I just still need to better understand the value of lots for DEP fiscally as a whole. So, I just wonder about what is the utility of lots for the water system and what is the value of our lots as a whole. So, I mean, we're here to move forward, and if we vote on the transfer of the lot, I do hope that we consider ensuring that for historical context and educational records, we find a way to tell the DEP story in relation to the lot. I joined this board because I do not take for granted the supply of water and the clean water that is provided to millions of New Yorkers. I mean, this commitment to me signals our city's way of participating in ensuring public health. So our future is uncertain, and I don't think we have yet worked through fully the ways that our water system can best function in the future. And
so if I may interject again, thank you, Member Fernandez-Ketchum. It's Joe Murin again. On the issue of, the assessment, AECOM is the engineer of record that works for the system, both for the Waterboard and for the Water Finance Authority. And the letter that is within the package, Bill Frank, who is the lead engineer that works for AECOM, he was also on that trip, with Chairman Carney, that did the assessment. And when we do any of these land transfers, it is our responsibility to have the engineer of record go through and assess the operational functionality as well as the revenue potential for any lot. So on the operational functionality, as I believe is indicated in the package, but I'll reiterate where, when Hunts Point was constructed in 1951, the city, began to transfer and close down those smaller wastewater treatment plants that were operating, including the one on Hart's Island, which serviced a portion of the eastern section of the Bronx at that time. So that was when the wastewater treatment plants was decommissioned, and then demolished eventually in 1970 because Hunts Point was then able to function to service whatever need was on that was being performed by the Hart Island plant at that time. The assessment is that this is, and by both the city council as well as by concurrence of the mayor, that, and remember, the city is the prime, is the owner of all of the assets, including the land that the board is leasing from the city. They have made the determination that it is in the best interest of both the city and the system to turn this lot over to, Department of Parks and have it be part of, the Hart Island Parks, ownership. And I believe there is a long-term, and maybe Parks can speak to this, in terms of what the eventual visitation rights people will have, because, like you said, there are, I think, a number of people who have had, family members that have been buried on the island. I think there were some community input, particularly in the Bronx area, to be able to have that. I don't know if Parks, and I'll turn it over to Mitchell in terms of that, whether, what their long-term plan is in terms of accessibility there. I also think it's a very interesting point you raise about, what acknowledgement, and that's something we could take back with Parks in terms of, Evelyn, about what, functionality and acknowledging that there was a value added at, for many, many years where Hart Island was serving, the community of the Bronx, as part of the water and sewer system, in terms of being able to service their needs. I don't know if that answered all your questions. Definitely please, follow up with me if you do have more on there. And also, Mitchell, I don't know if you want to talk about the long-term, plans for the site as a parks facility.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the longer-term vision for the island. So to answer the original question, I think it's brought up who is the public and what is the public's interest here. I think that in the memo, the reference to the public was in regards to a group of advocates that have been pushing for several decades now to have the island open to the public, which I think was not allowed until 2015, and then transferred out of Department of Corrections control to Parks control to make the island be a bit more welcoming and plan for additional public access in the future. As it stands right now, the Parks Department is continuing the Department of Corrections visitation procedures, which allowed for 2 visits per month for families and loved ones of those buried on Hart Island to come and visit grave sites and pay their respects like one would be able to do it at a private cemetery facility. So in the short term, until additional funding can be supplied and the transition progressed a bit further, that is the kind of access that Parks will be allowing at the site. But to your point about history of DEP's involvement on Lot 100 and just general history of the island overall, I think it is in Parks' vision that as additional funding is supplied, as more of a long-term master planning vision for the island is created, public access would be increased to some extent, still in the parameters of this being a cemetery or spectacle by a contemplative place. But to that degree, I think that some informational signage or different kinds of educational materials related to the various history of the island, the old buildings, the wastewater treatment plant that was demolished, all of this is on the table for potential information that would be available to the public in the future as the island goes from its current state, just kind of being family gravesite visits, to a bit more public accessibility in the future.
Mitchell, thank you for that. And I want to thank the members who have, I'm sorry, are there other questions or comments?
Yeah, Al, this is Dan. Mitchell, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. I think this island itself is really a solemn and meaningful site for New York City, and especially during the pandemic, I think we saw how this wasn't just a historic use site either, and it continues to serve New York City and those in need. And so where I'm going with this, I guess, very interested in sort of the future of this island and how it gets served and what Parks does with this. And One, I guess one quick question, is this lot specifically subject to the local law and the transfer, or because it was in DEP's jurisdiction that it wasn't referenced in the local law?
The local law did not break out the island in terms of its various lots, so our interpretation of the law was that the entire island was meant to be transferred to parks.
And am I right in thinking that any potential uses or any discussion that we've just had here about, the marketability or development of the site, this is city-owned waterfront property, which I had always assumed means it's essentially inalienable. It can't be sold. There's no residual value to the Waterboard on this because it is city-owned waterfront property. Is that correct?
I think you're using the term inalienable there in terms of parkland alienation, the state authority. Is that correct?
Well, I think I've heard that term used in reference to city-owned waterfront as well, and maybe that's incorrect or imprecise, but the city can't sell waterfront property.
I am not 100% certain whether that is correct or not. I do know that Colleen Alderson, our Chief of Parklands and Real Estate, is on the phone. Colleen, do you have any insight into that question?
Yes, I think that's correct. And I think this would be considered a waterfront law and would be subject to that. That's usually something DCAS and others, weigh in on, but I don't know why this one wouldn't be considered a waterfront property if the city would not do.
Wow.
If that's true, then it seems like there really are no alternate uses here that the board can be considering. And given the public policy needs to transfer the property to parks for the whole island, it seems like that's the public policy choice that's been made here, and it's consistent with what this board should be doing is supporting that effort, knowing that this doesn't have any value to the water system at this point.
Well,
so just a point, I guess.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
the Secretary, can I have your permission to add something to this discussion?
Please, Al.
Okay. So, as everybody on the board knows, the water system is owned by the city pursuant to the lease agreement between the city and the board. The board has leased the property, but both the statute and the lease only leases the property for water system purposes, okay? It doesn't lease the property for development purposes. It doesn't lease the property for the board to hold assets. The only use that the board has right to the property is for operations of the system. So if the property is not being used as part of the operations of the system, then technically under the lease, this property really doesn't fall under the lease. But that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're transferring control and jurisdiction of the property, if it's approved, from one city agency to another, and those kinds of transfers are provided for also in the lease. And what the lease actually says is that there are two provisions that would allow this type of thing, but the summary of both those provisions is that if the property that's being the control of the property that's being transferred, if it doesn't affect the revenues of the system, and if it doesn't have anything to do with the operations of the system, then I think that puts the board in a corner where it really has to approve these kinds of transfers. And with respect to any other use of the property, the lease also states that the board can't transfer, sell, or use the the property for any other purposes under the purposes of the board and the authority without the consent of the city. So, I mean, really, that puts the board in a position where they really couldn't do anything with the property other than use it for water system purposes without the consent of the city. And if the property is not really being used for the operations of the system or is producing any revenue, then the board really wouldn't have a rational reason not to approve the transfer of the control of the property between city agencies.
And technically has not the property transfer should have occurred back to the city at least.
Right.
When there was no wastewater treatment facility in use there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay, all right. And Al, thank you. That's extremely helpful for me. I hope other members have found that those pieces of information useful. Are there any other questions or comments about the resolution that's before us?
This is Evelyn. I just want to say thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the responses because I am much clearer now and totally get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you for your comments. Hearing no other questions or comments, we have before us a resolution approving the transfer of Lot 100 to the park on Hart Island to the Parks Department. May I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Adam, that was you?
That was Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. Thank you. Is there a second, please?
This is Adam, second.
Thank you, Adam. We're going to have another voice vote. The motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Rodriguez, would you call the roll? Hello? Hello?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah, I had an issue with my mute button. Chairman Carney, how do you vote on the resolution?
Yes, I vote to approve the transfer.
Member Fernandez Ketchum, how do you vote?
Approve.
Thank you. Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Sue, how do you vote?
Approve.
Thank you. Member Shaw, how do you vote?
Approved.
Member Zarrilli, how do you vote?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have unanimous approval of the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The resolution is approved. The transfer either has been or will be made shortly. Agenda item number 5. I'm sorry, was there a comment? Agenda item number 5 is an update on fiscal year 2021 financials and investment results and a year-to-date revenue update.
Okay, this is Chief Financial Officer Joe Murin of DEP. I'll start with the revenue update. Overall, fiscal year 2021 finished somewhat better than the financial plan for the year. In light of the pandemic, the system adopted a conservative budget assumed lower revenues. We knew that fiscal year 2020 was likely to show lower revenues than our baseline prior to the start of the pandemic, as customers experienced reductions to personal, rental, and business income, and water use overall declined due to diminished commuter and tourist traffic. We adopted expense budgets that could fit into the lower revenue profile that we still view as sufficient, that we still viewed as sufficient to operate and maintain the system to an adequate standard while meeting obligations to the system's bondholder. Operating revenues declined during the year by 4.6%, a reduction of $175 million compared to the prior year. That is, it was 3.656 billion versus 3.831 billion in 2020. As a reminder, the board adopted an operating revenue budget for the year of 3.315 billion, with final audited numbers subject to accounting adjustments coming in $341 million above the operating plan. Lower revenues reflected a reduction in water use by customers in the city, with total water use by metered customers decreasing by 3.8% compared to the year before, which was the net effect of a plus 0.3% increase in residential water usage compared to fiscal year 2020, and a negative 14.9% in non-residential users. I'll pause there before we move on to see if any of the members have any questions on the revenue update.
None here, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Omar to continue on other financial updates.
I'm gonna touch on a little more than we normally do, some of the balance sheet items, as well as the wholesale side of our revenues. Combined system liquidity was very strong at the year end. We had $2.3 billion of cash and securities on hand, of which $1.6 billion was restricted. Looking at the combined authority Waterboard balance sheet and liquidity profile. We don't talk about this so often, but I did want to touch on it this year. The system's net investment in capital assets increased in fiscal year 2021, despite all the delays and disruptions everywhere in the world, basically, but here as well, in completing construction projects. The net carrying value of the system's fixed asset portfolio increased to $32.5 billion, an increase of $766 million. Looked at its original cost of assets, the fixed asset portfolio has a value of more than $50 billion. I view that as a major achievement, as well as the outperformance on the revenue budget. Completing large construction projects in the city, the complexity that DEP undertakes is challenging in the best of times, and with the backdrop of the pandemic, it was probably triply challenging. And despite that, the city was able to add $766 million of fixed asset value to the plant and equipment we used to generate the revenue in the first place. That was a highlight I did want to draw attention to. Revenues for the fiscal year 2021 were more than sufficient to meet debt service coverage and were consistent with the expectations of the credit rating agencies. Lower revenues did not have an impact on the board's ability to meet its financial obligations to DEP or to bondholders, and the board was able to fund a larger DEP operating budget in fiscal year 2021 than the year before. Similarly, all bondholder payments of principal and interest were made on time and in full during the year. All three of the major credit rating agencies reaffirmed their high investment grade rating of the authority's senior and junior debt securities in September 2021 as well. The wholesale water supply side was a little different. We saw wholesale water sales increase by 5% during fiscal year 2021 due to higher consumption by communities north of the city. Not totally surprising given the changing commuting patterns. A lot of people who would be in the city weren't, because they were staying at home, working from home in the suburbs. To further contextualize it, just to remind everyone, at fiscal year 2019, there was a huge improvement in water efficiency on the wholesale side. We saw a 17% reduction in the water sales that year. So this is probably a little bit of the reversal of that effect. But probably mostly due toward the kind of change, the temporary, we hope, change in commuting patterns from the suburbs into the city. Revenues from overdue interest charges decreased by 19% during the year to $31 million from $39 million the year before, due to a reduction in the rate of interest we are allowed to charge in overdue bills under City Council legislation. The Council, in our view, prudently reduced the late interest charge as part of the general COVID relief effort, and therefore, when we charge a lower rate of interest, of course, the amount of late interest we collect falls in tandem to that. So we still did collect a significant amount of late interest, but less than we did in the prior year. In light of the increase in delinquencies, the audited financial statements for fiscal year 2021 reflect an increase as well of 1.3% in the percentage amount used to calculate the balance sheet reserve we carry for receivables that may not be immediately collectible. This is an accounting convention to kind of guide analysts and rating agencies about the timing and magnitude of what we think we'll be able to collect on the receivable side. Generally, with substantially most of the water charges we issue, the charges are a senior governmental claim secured by real property. They're collectible when the property gets sold or refinanced. We charge that late interest rate. In the meantime, the issue is that people, especially in New York City, hold on to property for decades and decades. So we do take that reserve as a prudent accounting device to capture the economic value of what, for modeling purposes, might not be immediately collectible. And I'll hand it to Jeff Lynch to talk about the current year fiscal update.
Yeah, hello, this is Deputy Commissioner Jeff Lynch. Turning to the current fiscal year 2022, we can provide you with an update on the revenue and water consumption. So through October 13th of this year, revenues were $1.54 billion, which is about 0.2% above the revenue plan for the year to date, and about 0.1% below revenue at this time last year. The variance on that is the variance of the plan on that is about $3 million. Just as a reminder, DEP implemented a 2.76% rate increase as approved by the board at its June meeting. For the first 2 months of the fiscal year, water consumption was 1.1% lower than the year before, reflecting a 3.4% reduction in residential use and a 7.3% increase in non-residential use. We're still reviewing metered billing data for September and October, and the early reviews indicate that meter billing is beginning to follow an upward trend beginning in September. We'll provide the board with a more detailed analysis of water consumption trends with the next fiscal update, with the next financial update. Delinquencies continue to be at elevated levels, resulting from property owners deferring payments due to reduction in their personal or business incomes and to non-payment of rent by tenants. We believe the decision to not close on a lien sale during the fiscal year 2020 and 2021, while consistent with the policy goals of providing the the broad-based customer relief during the peak of the pandemic, contributed to the higher delinquencies, as well as the recent decision to exclude water charges from the city's lien sale in process right now during the fiscal year 2022. In addition, reductions to the interest rate charged on overdue bills to 3% has made the economic cost of non-payment less severe. I'll turn it back over to Omar.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the board's investment portfolio. Where the board is going to be asked to vote shortly on the fiscal year 2021 investment report, which summarizes what we bought and sold during the year, and to readopt the board's investment guidelines. For all the members, and particularly for Dan as well as members of the public, the investment philosophy we've had since 1997, when we originally adopted the investment guidelines we're currently working under and worked under continuously without revision or amendment since 1997, are exceptionally conservative. What we're allowed to buy under the guidelines is basically bonds, notes, and bills sold by the U.S. Treasury. So just about the least risky security you can buy. We're allowed to buy federal agency securities that are explicitly guaranteed by the federal government, not the implicit guarantees, the explicit guarantee, which is basically Ginnie Mae. We're also allowed to buy. We haven't done this, probably ever, but certainly not in the last decade. A particular category of loans, which are short-term in nature, and that are completely collateralized by those same types of securities, so U.S. Treasury securities and those federally explicitly backed Ginnie Mae securities. And those three are that's all we're allowed to buy. We don't do real estate or stocks or even corporate bonds. We don't do any of that stuff. So the guidelines, in terms of what we're allowed to invest in, are very conservative. For the last 5 years, we've been on, even the sort of conservative side of conservative, where the only things we bought, going back to 2016, are Treasury bills and notes, so the shorter term securities issued by the federal government. And starting 2 years ago, when the pandemic was rearing its head, we brought in the duration of what we're allowed to buy even shorter. So we only buy the shortest term Treasury securities you can buy now. We do it that way because as interest rates move around in the market, the price of bonds moves around in response. We have always been concerned about losing losing the face value of our bonds, in response to a whipsaw in interest rate movements in the market. So that's been a prudent investment strategy in the sense we've never lost money, going back to 2016. And we haven't, if you can go back further than that too, we haven't had a down year where we had a sort of loss on the investment portfolio. It has a flip side, which is when market rates become very low, as they have been trending lower for years and years and years, for like 20 years now, they've been rates have been falling. And in the aftermath of the pandemic, the yield on short-term Treasury securities fell by about 90%. So they went from 2% to about 1/5 of 1% in pretty short order. So I offer all that as just kind of context and background to what we do here for Dan and then for the members of the public. All of which is to say the investment income for the board this year was $376,000, which we're happy to to make on the portfolio, but it was the lowest investment return we've made on the board side since 2014, and it was sort of a stunningly small return when you think about we had at its peak about $1.6 billion of Treasury securities. Just to kind of explain how that could be, if you take the $1.6 billion and you multiply it by that 1/20th of 1%, you take into account that we don't hold the stuff for the full year. We start our savings portfolio basically zero, and then we accumulate bonds really starting at the 6-month mark. We pay the city first and the bondholders first, then we start to accumulate savings at the midpoint. And those very low rates on the stuff we buy times that fraction of a year leads you can have a very large investment portfolio, but if you're buying the low risk stuff, the lowest risk, the low risk, you end up with a pretty modest investment portfolio or investment return for the year. So that's I view it actually as a success in the sense we didn't lose money in a very, very crazy year with a lot going on in the capital markets. But it was the smallest investment return we've had since 2014. Not an unprecedented low number, but the lowest in several years. We don't plan to take any more risk in the portfolio next year. You'll see that the investment guidelines we're going to propose to you to readopt shortly are identical to what the board saw first in 1997. And we in terms of what we actually are doing in the portfolio, we don't plan to do anything different other than buy those short-term Treasury bills for the foreseeable future. For the reason that we're really using these investments as a savings proxy. This is not a venture capital portfolio. We're trying to use this as a savings vehicle and earn a little bit of return safely on top of it. So that's the update on that. It's sort of a successful year in the sense we didn't lose money. With a lot going on. Sort of disappointing year in the sense it was the lowest return since 2014, explained by those low market yields and by the fact we only buy the bonds for part of the year to start with. So that's it. And Michael O'Keefe is going to provide you with the next update on the DEP operating update.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael O'Keefe, Deputy Chief Financial Officer for DEP. Tropical Storm Ida reached the city on September 1st, bringing with it periods of unusually heavy rainfall that resulted in sewer overflows, flooding throughout the city, including roadways, and the closure of the subway system. DEP's offices were temporarily closed due to electrical power issues, although employees were able to pivot to remote work due to the personal technology put in place during the pandemic. Total rainfall in the city varied by neighborhood, with some areas seeing as little as 2 inches of rainfall from the storm, and others seeing much more at 8 inches. A particular challenge was the rate of rainfall, with rain falling in certain areas at a rate of 3 inches per hour, a rate that exceeds the capacity of most sewer construction. On September 27th, in response to the impacts of Storm Ida and in preparation for future extreme storms, the city announced plans to commit an additional $2.1 billion in DEP's capital budget for flood mitigation infrastructure. This funding, which is spread across fiscal years 2023 to 2031, focuses on increasing DEP's sewer replacement cycle, expansion of both the Bluebell system and green infrastructure, and other measures to make the city more resilient to intense rain events. The city also announced plans to accelerate over $200 million in existing DEP capital projects and add funding for expense programs aimed at reducing flooding. At this time, DEP projects that these additional capital funds and accelerations will have minimal impact on annual rate increases. With that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Lynch and Albert Kramer to discuss the new billing system.
Well, I think if we, Jeff, if we could just pause for a second to see if any of the members have questions, because I think yeah, go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Forgive me, my mute button isn't doing what it should be doing. Are there any questions for any of the four presenters so far?
This is Dan. Just I want to make sure I heard correctly. What I think I heard is that the investment guidelines are not changing. The resolution is a continuation of the same investment guidelines that we've had since 1997.
Correct. You're going to be asked to vote to adopt the investment guidelines, and they are exactly the same, not a word changed from what was in place last year, and it's what's been in place every year since 1997. So yes, you have to vote to re-adopt, but it's the same thing.
Great, thank you. And the second question is about, you mentioned additional capital dollars after Hurricane Ida. Can you just clarify, is that city GO debt, or is that Waterboard debt that's associated with those new capital dollars?
That's water utility funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for the presenters? Omar, is staff giving any thought, given this year's, isn't abysmal performance? We made nearly $400,000, but is there any thought being given to revising in any way the investment guidelines?
No. If there's an interest to kind of explore taking somewhat more interest rate risk in the hope of a higher investment return, there are a number of options for doing that under the existing guidelines. I mean, so starting with resuming the practice we had in 2016 or 17 of buying a mix of bills and notes. And taking, so right, we buy everything right now of a duration of less than 1 year to maturity. You could take it out to 1 to 2 years to maturity, and there would be a higher return associated with that, as well as investment risk. But on the sums of bonds we have in the portfolio, small changes in interest rate can have a large dollar effect. I mean, the board will recall this used to be a $5 to $10 million a year investment performance on the board side. So 376 is, again, it's extremely low compared to where we were even a couple of years ago, but not unprecedented. But I would say that the board wants to have a discussion around enhancing the investment returns, kind of over and above just waiting for the yield on bills to hopefully pop back upward more than where they are. I would say the first steps to look at would be, let's look at taking more interest rate risks within the Treasury world, or even the kind of the secure agency world, before undertaking a revision of the investment guidelines, because there are a number of options for trying to enhance investment returns within the guidelines we already have, versus a wholesale amendment of the guidelines.
Might we have a conversation about that at one of the upcoming board meetings? Might you present some options to the board for investing differently without revising the guidelines?
Absolutely. We'll take that as a to-do, and we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments for the presenters? I'm sorry, so there is one remaining presentation.
Yeah, so this is Deputy Commissioner Jeff Lynch on the billing system. So we're 5 weeks in past our new billing system launch. We implemented DEP's new UMAX billing system on September 7th. And it's been an early success despite the ongoing pandemic, the historic flooding that happened the week before we launched, and the normal kind of growing pains on the operational side when you launch a system like this. First, I just want to thank all of our partners in this effort, BCS, BIT, other bureaus throughout DEP, our vendor Itineris, our trusted advisor EMA, we wouldn't have been able to launch the system to better serve the city of New York without the full team on this very complex project. Our staff were in the office early this summer, following all the safety guidelines to complete over 25,000 hours of UMAX training and thousands more hours of practice in the new system above and beyond the training, so that they were as prepared as possible for the launch in early September. The project is now in our 6-month operations phase, where we're focused on stabilizing the new system, and that includes triaging technical and process challenges, as well as continuing to build our staff's expertise in the new system. Our extensive testing phases that we did for the project resulted in, as of right now, again, 5 weeks in, no serious bugs being detected in the new system since our launch. Also, after our planned pause of billing for the first week of launch, billing commenced in UMAX, and we've sent out bills to hundreds of thousands of customers who are receiving our new bill from the new system. And now, here in October, we're returned to kind of our normal billing pace. This is the standard way of launching a new billing system. Just as an example of one of the teams that has been doing really well in the new system, our billing exceptions unit, which is responsible for monitoring possible issues with bills before they go out to new customers, has done an excellent job, and our bill quality going out to customers, the bills that have been generated in UMAX has been excellent, which we're very happy to report. Additionally, a couple of the key pieces to the new launch were, we included a new online customer portal for folks' MyDEP accounts, and it's been very well received. We've had it visited over 130,000 times since the launch. We've also been using our new easy to understand color bill. That's a big improvement over our old bill for our customers. And that's, we've even gotten some proactive compliments from the public and our customers on the new bill. DEP and the Waterboard staff have reacted, mostly positively to the new system, despite some challenges, including in, readjusting to being back in the office and the expected learning curve of a very complicated new billing system in UMAX. As part of the launch, the phased-in launch, our key business processes gradually started up over the last month. That includes, a couple examples: our field inspections, our denial of access unit, our borough office taking appointments from customers. That's been going very well and continuing to ramp up as we continue to get further into the stabilization efforts. Our vendor Itineris, our DEP's trusted advisor EMA, and our project team members that were on the project team for many months, or quite frankly, some for more than a year, have continued to support our operations, with floor walking and technical issues. But I also, want to just highlight the team is continuing to work through some expected challenges. I'll highlight 2 or 3 of them. There's complicated billing adjustments that involve migrating data from our old system, and those we continue to work through. We have a slower call center response times due to staffing shortages, as well as a bump in call volume from customers with questions as they re-register their bill, their online billing, and other questions about the new system. But we've augmented that by shifting some of our operational staff that is less critical in the early phases to taking calls on a short-term basis. And then last, we've had some delays in cash flow related to the planned shift of billing phases. as well as the auto pay schedule for the new system. And this is all connected to the kind of transition from the old to the new system, to give us all a little bit of a window for making sure there are no major bugs right after launch, and allow the staff to adjust to the new system. That was kind of the major update on our side here with the new billing system.
Jeff, can you hear me? It's Al.
Yeah, I hear you, Al.
First of all, thank you very much for helping me to see how the implementation of the system is working, hosting me at your offices and introducing me to a lot of members of your staff. It's an incredibly high hurdle that you all are dealing with. I'm sure you got your bumps and potholes, but the fact of the matter is that your staff is extremely enthusiastic about the successful implementation. The launch has gone exceedingly well. I don't want to jinx that by having something take a left turn now, but thank you for taking the time to help me understand the complexity of putting this new system into operation. It seems to be going extremely well.
Thank you, Chair, and the staff was very, very happy to see you as you walked through the floors. It was good for them to talk to you a little bit when you were here.
Well, you're kind to say that. They probably wondered what is he looking for. I wasn't looking for anything. It was very encouraging to talk to people, your team leaders, who were just really up. Feeling good about the success of the implementation. Thank you very much for what you're doing for all of us. It was very special to see. Are there questions for now any of the, 5 presenters? Then I think we can move on to the next agenda item. And thank you all very much. We're going to vote on the acceptance of the 21 and 20 financial statements. Before we do that, the board should be aware that the Joint Audit Committee of the Water Finance Authority and the Waterboard met immediately preceding this meeting to hear a presentation from our external auditors, Grant Thornton. And that meeting was terrific. It was brief, and it was really it was a testament to what the two organizations are able to do together to put these combined financial statements together. The short story is that we received an unmodified opinion, the so-called clean opinion. We also heard that our internal control environment in every separate area of inquiry, that internal control environment was good or very good. It was a very encouraging report from the external auditors. Bob Balducci, who may be on the phone now, in my view, is doing a terrific job, along with Omar Nazem, of putting together those financial statements in such a way as to make them attractive, and successfully so with the auditors. Thank you both very much for that. Adam Freed and John Goldman were also at that meeting as members of the Joint Audit Committee. Do you have any comments?
No comments. I would just echo your statement. It was a thorough meeting, and not only we'll walk through the findings of the audit and the review, but also the methodology and process they went through, which is continues to be very thorough.
It was. I agree. John?
No further comments here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, then. Then we're going to proceed to vote to approve the 20 and 21 financial statements. May I have a motion to do so?
Al, can I jump in with one quick question? This is Dan.
Oh, hey, Dan. Yeah, of course.
So at the back of the package, and maybe I didn't realize this was in the financial statement, there's a number of KPIs, the key performance measures for the system. And I want to just familiarize myself with these because I think they're important. And it's the last one in particular that I'm looking at, that how we've set a performance goal of establishing rates that provide for sustainable, high-quality delivery of water and sewer services.
Sure.
And what I'm curious about is that the answer to that is largely driven by our bond ratings. And I'm curious,
I think that's right.
It could be very subjective to figure out how we're providing for sustainable, high-quality delivery of water services.
Especially given what you and I both know about the rating agencies.
Right, and I'm just curious if that's the right way to answer this kind of question, or if over time we can think about that KPI in a different way, especially in this post-Ida moment when there's a lot of focus on the sustainability of the sewer network in particular.
Well, certainly we can talk about it, Dan. It's an interesting question, and there may well be a better way to think about that specific topic, that is the performance measures topic, generally. Happy to sit down with you and do that.
Chair, this is Adam Freed. I assume there's nothing that would prevent us from having multiple metrics, because I think the complexity of the system and the fiduciary responsibility brought in, to Dan's point, it's often focused on drinking water, but the sewer system and the services provide would be interesting to think about a number of metrics that could come together for that.
I agree. There's no reason we could not have different approaches to determining the performance measures. Sure.
So this is
Thanks, Al. So I guess
we'll take that as
a
to-do
go ahead.
for follow-up with the board. We'll take that as a to-do, make it a follow-up item with the board for a future meeting. We can schedule some catch-up sessions on alternate ideas or approaches.
Okay. Certainly works for me. Thank you, Omar. And Adam, thank you. And Dan, thank you too. So, may I have a motion, please, to approve the financial statements now audited for fiscal years 20 and 21?
This is John. I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second. Adam.
Adam, thank you very much. We're going to have a voice vote. Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To approve.
Member Fernandez-Ketchum, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Stu, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Shaw, how do you vote? We can come back. I'll see if she's still on the phone. Member Zerilli, how do you vote?
Approved.
Member Shaw, are you still on to vote? Okay, Mr. Chairman, the resolution has passed by a vote of 6
Thank you.
board members.
Thank you very much. And the record will indicate that Member Shaw did not vote.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
yes, please.
This is John. May I just ask a quick question? Do we need to have a formal vote on the investment guidelines adoption?
I think we do.
It's two resolutions.
I suggest we do, Mr. Chairman.
Right. It is the next agenda item, at least on the agenda that I've got in front of me. The investment guidelines and investment report, and because we are asked to vote. May I combine the two, or do we vote on them separately? That is the investment guidelines and the investment report itself.
I think you could do it jointly.
It's a single resolution, so there's one resolution that covers both items.
That's fine. Then may I have a motion, please, to approve the investment guidelines and investment report?
This is John. I so move.
Thanks, John. Second, please.
Evelyn, second.
Thank you, Evelyn. We're going to have a voice vote, and I'll ask Mr. Rodriguez to read the roll.
Yes, I will. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To approve.
Member Fernandez-Ketchum, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Stu, how do you vote?
Approved.
Member Zerilli, how do you vote?
Approved.
Thank you. Member Shaw, how do you vote? If you're here?
Yeah, I'm here, approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much to all of you.
That's the unanimous approval of the resolution.
Right. Got it. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask Ms. Shaw if she would like to vote on resolution number 6? That was the 6th agenda item.
Arlene, we had a vote
Apologies
to.
on that. I approved that resolution. My apologies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that vote becomes a unanimous vote as well.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. The last agenda item, I believe, is it's numbered 8 here, and it is DEP's
We actually
presentation.
went a bit out of sequence there. We actually covered that one, with the presentation.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether or not we needed to say something else. We did not. We do not.
That was the reason for my confusion, Mr. Chair, in asking if we do the other vote.
It's a great question, John. Thank you. Then, is there any other business to come before this board? Hearing no comments at all, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Well, then I'll second it, it's John.
Thank you. Again, voice vote. Mr. Secretary?
Yes. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To adjourn.
Member Fernandez Ketchum, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Thank you. Member Freed, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Stu, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Shaw, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
And Member Zerilli, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Thank you. Unanimous approval to adjourn the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. It's a good meeting. We covered a lot of ground today. I'll look forward to our next gathering. Maybe it'll be in person. We'll see. Thank you all for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.